If you've been watching my videos for some time now, consider going over to Patreon and helping me out. Helps me keep making free content just like this video you're about to see today. And you get some really neat perks like free Udemy courses and a whole bunch of other little cool, neat things like that. CSS Grid. It is absolutely my favorite tool for making grids. I used to use some of the same things as you. I'm sure you've tried these. Bootstrap, Foundation, UIKit. And yes, they do work to make grids. And, if you've already built something with those and you've used that grid, that's not a problem. But what I want you to do from this video forward, now that you've seen this, is just stop using it. It's horrible. And the reason I say it's horrible is because it's not consistent. And if you, for instance, work for one client or work for yourself or work on this project or that project, all of them have this different grid. And for me personally, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this as well, you start getting used to a grid, you like it, it's working well, and then you have to use a completely different one the next day and on a different project. And I find this to be like a really large cognitive overload. And don't get me wrong, some of them are better than others. The last one I was using that I was enjoying was UIKit. Of course, I've used Bootstrap's grid and Foundation. I even made my own grid when responsiveness was becoming a thing, with floats and percentages and things like that, which was way worse than using Bootstrap. So when Bootstrap came out, sorry, I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, that was a lifesaver. And we're like, yes, okay, finally we have a grid, and this is amazing. And then Bootstrap, of course, had all these other things. But now that the grid is built into CSS, what I want you to think of is like when you install a CSS framework like Bootstrap or Foundation, something like that, I want you to be installing it for the other things that it has, not the grid. So I a lot of times I try to just use my own knowledge, like make my own modals or my own tooltips or whatever else that CSS framework comes with, and not use it. But they're also pretty valuable, and sometimes when I'm in a hurry and I need to just make something really quickly, I use a CSS framework, and I use all the stuff except for the grid. The grid that's built into CSS is absolutely amazing. I know I'm talking a lot, but one other thing I want to tell you is a lot of people have used or have heard Flexbox too. I've used both. I used Flexbox before I used grid. And it was really actually pretty hard to learn how to use Flexbox, and somebody was like, hey, you need to learn grid. It's really intuitive and easy. So I did, and I've never looked back on, I've never used Flexbox again. So I say if you're considering Flexbox, just don't even do it. It's not worth it. And if you've already learned Flexbox, know that what you're about to learn today in this video is going to be way easier and way more intuitive. And you'll remember things like Flexbox seems like you always have to go look it back up because it just doesn't stick with you. The CSS grid, on the other hand, will stick with you. So I think I've summed all that up. Let's go ahead and get started. So here I am on my desktop. I'm going to go ahead and create a folder called grid tutorial, I guess. And we'll cd into that. And let's touch index.html, styles, .css, and I think that's all we're going to need for that. Get Visual Studio open. I use Visual Studio. Obviously, you can use anything you want. If you're taking this, then you probably know that. It's just a simple text editor. This is my preference. So in index, let's start by creating the markup. Now, of course, we could have a whole doc type here, and you can style that however you want. This one's fine for this. So let's go ahead and connect up the style sheet. We'll just do link, and we're going to go to styles.css. All right, so really easy to do. We're just going to create a div with a class of my grid. And inside here, we're going to put some content. So we're going to put some children. These are anything like a p tag or a div tag, span tag. Any opening and closing tag is going to be considered a child. And this is actually how the grid works, is based on children. So with this one class, I can make a grid. Unlike, like in other grid CSS frameworks where you have to apply a class to every single child. So in here, I'm just going to say, let's do some lorem ipsum. And we'll just go ahead and copy this a few times. I'm going to do like a grid of 3. Although you could do like 12 or 16, how many ever like grids, like columns you want. These are all, each one of these is going to be a column. So if we go and we look at this right now, of course, what we're going to see, or let me ask you, what do you think you'll see? And if you said you're going to see all of this going like from top to bottom, no columns whatsoever, you're absolutely right. So let's take a look at that real quick. So this is what you were probably expecting, and that's what we got. But what we want to do is break these into 3, let's say 3 equal columns for now, and then I'll teach you how to do not equal columns as well. All right, so to make this happen, we will head over to our CSS. We already linked that up right there. And what we're going to say is we did my grid. So I'm going to say dot my grid. That's going to access the class that I put on there. And I'm going to say display grid. And then on the next line, I'm going to say grid. And if you take a look at that, you're not going to see anything. Nothing happens, okay? This is where the magic comes in. I'm going to say grid template columns. It's going to be 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. That stands for the FR stands for fractions. So I'm basically saying I want these to be equal columns. So if I go ahead and I refresh now, awesome, I have columns, which is amazing. This is exactly what I wanted. Now, as far as the fractions go, if I want one to be bigger than the other, let's say I want the middle one to be bigger than the outside ones, I could put a 2 here, for instance. And that'll make it twice. So this column right now is twice as big as these ones. And if you're anything like me, the first time I saw this, I was like, holy moly, this is so amazing. So I hope that's how you're feeling at home right now. Like, this is way easier than using Bootstrap or anything that you could possibly think of using. Flexbox, all that stuff is junk. Throw it out the window. I am sorry if you learned it. I feel the same way. I'm like, man, why did I have to learn all this other stuff ahead of this? But this is the way to go now. And then, of course, I can change these numbers to anything. Let's say I want 1, 2, 3. So this one's going to be a little smaller. This one's going to be twice as big as that one. And this one's going to be 3 times as big as this one. And the math always works out. So you don't have to be a mathematician to use this. So let's say I put, like, say, 8 over here. It's not going to have a problem. It doesn't matter what number I put here. It's always going to work out. This one is 8, and these ones are smaller. And so I could even do like 16 here and leave a 2 here, or maybe I want this one to be 12. I don't know. I don't normally have to get this high in number, but if you're really looking for like fine tuning, like the size of one of your boxes needs to be like a very specific size and the other ones, sometimes you have to bring the numbers up a little bit, but the math's always going to work out. Notice, and this is actually a good segue into this, you'll notice like right now, this is actually almost touching this column, right? So there's actually no space between them right now, and that's a little bit of a problem. And I want you to see that. I'm going to help you visualize that by saying, let's do this. Let's copy this real quick. And let's style all the children of my div, my grid, all the div children. So what I'll do is I'll say background color is going to be, let's do like aquamarine. And let's refresh this real quick. So now everything is green. And I wanted everything to be green is because actually 3 different divs were styled here, every one of these. But this is the way I can visualize what happens when I do this. So I'm going to say grid gap. And the gap I want to be, you can make it a percentage or a pixel. I usually do pixels. I'm going to leave that up to you, but I usually do like a 20, 30, 40 pixel gap, something like that. Depends on what website I'm making. But you notice now I have gaps, which is really pretty here. Now, one other thing that you're probably noticing right now is like, what is this space around the grid itself? Well, that actually is, you probably heard of like a CSS reset, which comes with, gosh, I say this like a million times, Bootstrap or Foundation, something like that. But we need to reset that. And so let's go up here It's actually on the body tag, believe it or not. If you do like a little inspection, you'll find it there. I'm gonna not get that into that much detail, but if I just do body and I say margin, and I put a margin of 0px on the body, you'll see that go away. And the reason I want that to go away is a lot of times I want the outside, like around the outside of my grid, to be the equal distance. Like I want it to be the similar as my gap. So I know my gap is 20px. So now what I can do is I can go to my grid and I can just put a margin on the grid. So I'm going to say margin 20px too. And this is how I can really fine tune the look and feel of my grid. So now I should have equal spaces above and around and in between as well. Which now you can see the next problem I'm having is like, well, all this text is touching the grid. And I wouldn't really call it a problem, but how do we fix it? Because we know that no website's going to have it like stuck to the edges of there. If they do it, we're going to look really old, right? Like kind of like this looks right now. So let's go ahead and say, to get that off of there, what we can do is we can attach to every single one of the children, okay? We could do them individually too, right? So I could go in here and I could say, you know, class equals something, you know, let's just go ahead and do it real quick. Since I already did half of it. Oops, sorry, type it badly. Okay. Grab that real quick, come back in here, and I could say like this, and then I could say padding would be equal to, I don't know, let's put a 30 pixel padding on it. And so now I could style them one at a time. Oh, gotta save index. And I could really fine tune, like maybe this one doesn't need as much padding or any padding at all. And that's kind of a good thing to be able to do each one at a time. A lot of times, I want to style them all. So the easiest way to do that is just take the padding and put it on this thing here where we're doing all the children. So I'll leave that up to you how you want to handle that, but that's how you kind of fine tune that. And so now it's starting to look kind of decent. Totally not needed for this tutorial, but I can't stand the default font that comes like out of the box in the browser, so we'll just change this to sans serif. Yeah, that looks nicer. Okay, cool. So now what I want to do is I want to show you a few other things here. So what if let's go ahead and put these real quick to equal columns again, okay? Just for the fun of it. And what we'll do now is break this down responsively, okay? So right now it's sort of responsive. Like you can see that it's it's getting smaller equally, and everything is sort of kind of like what we want, right? However, what I want to do is I want those to like kind of break down. So like when I get here, I want to have like 2 columns instead of 3, and then when I get here, I want to have like 1 column, right? And this is actually where a lot of people are like, well, how do I use Grid instead of Bootstrap or whatever? Because that's already built into Bootstrap and that's why it's better. But that's not technically, Bootstrap's not better for that. Like you can't control the breakpoints, right? It has like certain ones like 740 or like 1020 or something like that. With this, you can infinitely fine tune how many columns you want. So this is way better, okay? In my opinion, because I love controlling my columns and my breakpoints, but it does take a little bit of knowledge of media queries. And actually, this is about the only time like when I'm controlling my grid is the only time I'm really using media queries. You can use it for a ton of different things, but mostly like 99% of the time it's when I'm doing my columns. So if you're not familiar with media queries, don't be afraid. I'm going to cover them with you right now. They're really easy to use, and they get easier after you use them a few times. But don't be afraid, and don't feel like don't let that intimidate you or make you feel like this is really hard to do, because this is not that difficult, and you're only setting up your grids. You know, like it's not a big part of your project usually setting up your grids. Like a lot of your programming and styling and making your logos, things like that, it's going to take a long time. This is not that long. Oh, that was a lot, and I apologize. Let's do it real quick. So let's go ahead and break this down. I want to pull this down here, actually. Let's get rid of this one. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say at media, and then I'm going to open up these, and I'm going to say min width. And I want this to be min width of 100px. And the reason I always start at 100px is because if you Google it, no device, like even like a small iPhone screen, is like no less than 300. So if you're below 300, like this could say 300 to be fine, but I always do 100 because then I know I'm 100% safe. And I always start from small to big because I don't know, like maybe you have a really big, powerful iMac and it's got like a really high resolution or something. And I don't know how big that resolution is, to be honest with you. I don't know what the iMac resolution is. But let's just say you have these big monitors, and a lot of people do gaming monitors or whatever. Like, I don't know how big your screen's going to get, but I know how small your screen won't ever be. So I always start from minimum to high. So here, and then this is as easy as this. So what I'm basically saying is at 100px, I want a grid. I want it to be 1FR, 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 and the gap to be this, and the margin to be that. Now, I can just literally copy this and set a couple breakpoints. So let's say from 100 to 700. So basically, this is what's going to happen until I get to 700 pixels. So actually, from 100 to 700, I just want one column. And from 700 to, say, 1100, I want to have two columns. So I just get rid of 1FR, right? And now I have three columns from 1100 and up. So now if we check this out and refresh, I still have three columns here, but as soon as I start going down, as soon as I hit 700, I think is what I just said, right? I should end up with two columns. And if you notice, because I have three divs, it just drops to the next level. And so what will happen too is when I get down here to the next one, it goes down one more level, right? And so that's as simple as responsiveness is. And I could have as many of these as I want to, right? So if I wanted to, for instance, like have a few more of these, let me ask you this real quick, and I probably already gave the answer away with my media queries, but what if I just add three more? What do you think will happen at over 1100 pixels here if I refresh? Will I get over here on the right, will I end up with three more? Will this all be like jammed together? If you said yes, then probably you're with a lot of people. A lot of people think that, but the cool part about grid is that I said that I only want three columns, right? So what's going to happen is if I have 6 children, which I have 6 children here, right? Let's get rid of this thing. Don't need this anymore. We're not using it. Oops. Let's get rid of that. Okay. So I have 6 children here, right? They're just going to go down to the next level, right? So now I have these 6 children. So let's go back here and let's see what happens. So if I start breaking this down, my 6 children, and this is actually equal now. I don't have like one hanging out below because 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 3 divided by 2, 3 divided by 2, 6 divided by 3 is 2, right? So, and then 1, we don't have to worry about 1 because we know it's going to look good. It's all 1 here, right? Cool. So we're getting there. Now, one other thing, kind of a fine-tuning thing. I use this grid gap a lot. If we go back up here and see, we're not going to be, you know what, I tell you what, like I don't want this to be, I want to talk more about the grid and not responsiveness. So let's just call this the conclusion on the responsiveness for now, okay? Well, like that's all you really need to know about responsiveness. If you want to put that in, great. If you don't, let's go back to just talking about the grid. So I'm going to bring it back to this, which should just look the same as it does now. Or wait, we need more FRs, right? 2 more. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's say I want this grid right here, or this column gap, to be different than this row gap, okay? The way I can make that happen is by changing this to grid column gap. Okay, so now I don't have a row gap. So the rows will actually be stuck together, right? Isn't that kind of interesting? If I want to change them and fine tune them, maybe I want my columns, this actually happens to me a lot. I want my rows and my columns to be different. So I'll say grid row gap. You know, I actually need my rows to have a little more space because I have different thoughts happening. So let's put 60 instead of 20. Now my rows are further apart and my columns are not. I think that comes up a lot and is a pretty valuable thing to know about the grid. So the other thing I want to cover with you is this thing called grid auto rows. One thing that we can do is we can say grid auto rows, and it's kind of actually like a it almost looks like JavaScript if you're familiar with JavaScript. I know this is just a CSS thing. We're not going into JavaScript, so don't worry, but this sort of looks like a JavaScript method, right? And it kind of takes like two parameters. And so the first one is the minimum you want it to be. So the min is on the first. So the minimum, let's say, let's just guess right now, these are about like what, 200 pixels high, maybe higher, probably about 200. So let's say the minimum we want to be 300, so it gets a little bigger. And if it's the next one, we could say we want it to cap at, say, 500. Let's say 400. Okay. And so now what we're going to do, oh, sorry, we got to get our pixels on there. Okay. So now what we want to do, is that 300? Maybe with the padding it is. Let's go back down 2. Oh, I think it's because I set the max. Usually we'll do auto on the max. Let's do auto real quick and see what happens. Okay, that's exactly what I want. So, and this is actually way better if you ask me, setting the minimum, because like sometimes you want these to be a certain height, but you don't want to stop the content if they get too big. So with this little setting here, we're basically saying be at least 200 pixels high, but go ahead and grow if you need to. And what that means is if I have more content in one of these divs, let's kind of copy one of these lorem ipsums, and let's drop this div down a little bit so we can see what's happening here. So I'll put a few of these in here, and this div is still a child, even though I kind of broke it down differently. It's still a child, so I'm going to put that in here. And now what you'll see is that it'll actually grow. See how this row is bigger than this row? And it, like, I didn't grow a lot, so let's do like one more, okay? Oops, do that. I think I hit the wrong button there. Okay, put that in there. Sweet. So now it is not going, or I'm saying it's growing to meet the size of it. One thing I like about the grid is that these always end up matching up with this one. And a lot of times you may not have color behind them, but if you do, I think it looks nice when these things like match up. If you don't want them to grow with it, you can basically put like another div inside here and then color only the insides of those divs, right? I think you know what I mean by saying that, but so one other cool thing here, let's try this real quick. One thing I really like to do with this min max is, let's say I want the max to be 250. I want it to be at least 200 and the height to be 250. Okay, so notice this flows out, right? Looks pretty weird, and that's a problem. And like, well, there's content here. I'm probably going to want people to see that. Maybe in some cases not, but in my case, let's say I do want them to see that. So what I can do is I can say up on these divs, if anything gets too big, let's say first of all, I just want to hide it. If it's a little too long, it was a summary, it's okay. They don't need to see it all. Let's say that's the first scenario. I just don't even care if they see the rest of it. I'll just say overflow hidden, right? And that'll just crop that off. Even though it's there, you can't get to it. You can't see it. Now, personally, I don't know if that's ideal. So one other option is to say scroll, and this is actually really cool. So like if anytime the content in any one of my divs gets too big, I'll actually get a little scroll box and I can go up and down here, right? And I think that's pretty sweet. So the other thing that I want to show you is how flexible grid is with nested grids, right? So this is really cool. Like, oh, that's great. That's exactly what I want. I want something here and I want something here. However, here I want like a photo album, and it is also a grid because I want like 6 photos to show or something like that. Well, not a problem, because you can actually nest grids. So what we'll do is we'll go in here, and so let's say we wanted the third one to be a nested grid, right? So I'm going to open this up. This is the third one. Let's get this bad boy opened up so we can see it a little bit better. And in here, let's put some children. Let's put a div in here, and we'll put the word content for now. Actually, you know what? Let's go to the placeholder real quick. Placeholder.com. And you can get like these like fake images. So we'll actually put like an image in here. We can copy this out right here, and we'll put this in here. Now, of course, it's going to be, let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick. What do we have? Oh, that didn't copy out the way I wanted. Get the image. Okay. Oh, it's not getting the image tag, but that's okay. Let's make our own image tag. So we want this over here because it doesn't look right like that. Oh wait, sorry, that was a nested one. That's exactly where we want it. Do that. Didn't realize I already was nesting. Okay, bear with me. A little formatting here. Okay, so I'm gonna do here, IMG, and put a little alt tag on there because you have to have alt tags. Okay, so now I have this nested thing in here, right? There's no grid on it right now, so let's go take a look at it and then I'll show you how to put the grid on there. Dang, guess placeholder. I haven't been here for a while, but image source placeholder should be. Oh, there's a space here. Maybe that's why. Let's get rid of that. It kind of like fakes an image, which is kind of cool. Still not working. Okay. Oh, it didn't have the, it has to have the /150. That defines the size. 150. Okay, that should help. Let's see what that does. Nope, sure didn't. What is going on here? I don't see why mine is different than theirs, but like this, let's see. Let's try this one. Looks identical, right? I'm not sure why that copied in like that. Hopefully I'm not wasting your time. Oh, it came in. I must have wrote something wrong. I'm sure we'll see that in the when we watch the video later, whatever it was. But I'm in a hurry, so I'm not going to think too much about it. So I have this image here, and it is 150 because I haven't constrained it. And I could actually, if I want to, just so you kind of understand what's happening here, I could put a 250 here, and it'll be 250. Or should be. Yep, there we go. And of course, remember I had that overflow scroll like thing, so I think this one's scrolling, yeah. But what I want to do, and we can leave that for now, yeah, it's kind of a cool feature. But what I want to do is make a grid out of this. This is in a grid, like this is a child of this grid, right? But I want it to be a nested grid. So I'll say class equals, and I don't like the word grid like a bunch of times. Normally I'll call this like what the level is. So this would be like the header if I was making like a navigation or something, or navigation, right? But I called it my grid. This one I'm going to be more specific. I'll call this my photo album, or photo grid maybe, which would make more sense. So let's do photo grid, and I'll come in here and I can actually just copy this, believe it or not, which is cool to start out with. That's what I always do, especially when I don't have to go like up and down looking for it and it's really close. I just started a website. So in my photo grid, I want everything. I want a lot of photos kind of in a row. So let's say I want 5 photos in a row. So I'm going to put 5 FRs. And I want my gap to be 10 because it's a small area there. And I don't care, column and row gap can be the same. So let's go ahead and just do grid gap. My margin I don't care about because I have a padding on these anyway. And I don't care about this either. So technically all I want is the grid, I want 5 columns, and I want a gap of 10. And so now you should be able to see, we need one more though. And actually this would count as a child too. So technically you don't even need a div here. You could have a div, it wouldn't hurt anything. But let's just do children of images, right? Boom, boom, boom. So I have 5 columns, so let's do 5 at least. And let's see how that turns out. But I didn't save. Style. And I think they were going straight down, so they were there when I refreshed. Okay, so what do you think happened here? I put the columns, the grid, it should have worked, right? Everything should have been perfect. However, images don't come out of the box responsive. So we want to say IMG, and we want to say width. This is how we constrain things to their proportion, 100%. So this will either grow an image or it'll shrink an image depending on its container. And this is actually how you want to control the width of everything. You want to control it based on its container. And this has containers, so let's take a look. Wow, look at that. So this is the 30 pixel gap that we have on all of these, which you could change individually if you wanted. We talked a little bit about that earlier. This is the 10 pixel gap here. And then now what we can do is we can come in here, and if we have more of these images, we can just do that, right? Look at that. Look how nice that is. Pretty cool, right? You might want some media queries for that gap too, that grid too. Notice they actually will space the content out based on the height of this. So I'm going to talk more about that actually right now. So isn't that really cool? all of this stuff, isn't it amazing? I absolutely love it. So I want to show you this other really cool thing. If I sound really excited, I've known Grid. I would say I've been doing Grid for probably about 2 years now, but every time I use it, I still feel just as excited as the first day that I used it. It's something that I'm actually really passionate about. I don't get to use it as much as I want because I'm a programmer and I'm in JavaScript a lot and doing like React and Firebase, things like that. Some other things that I also really love, but very rarely, not very rarely, I don't spend a ton of time on the front end because it seems to go a little faster than the functionality of websites. But oh geez, I'm getting too long here. But I guess all I'm trying to tell you, probably one too many times, is that I absolutely love Grid, and I hope you love it too. Please, if you don't love Grid, tell me in the comments. But if you do like end up trying it and loving it as much as me, I would love to hear that in the comments as well on this video. Tell me what your personal experience is with it. Tell me if you like it as much as Bootstrap or Foundation or more than those, or if you still like Flexbox, or if you think I'm wrong about Flexbox, I would like to hear that. I still think this is like super intuitive. This is my personal opinion, and easy to use, super easy to remember. Okay, cool. So let's try this real quick. So let's move on to the next example here. So I'm going to do this real quick. Let's do this. Let's get rid of this. And inside here, let's just write content. Let's put it in a p tag, okay? And let's get rid of all this CSS and stuff except for the grid one. So my grid. Okay. What I want to show you, and I just wanted to take it out of all the grid columns because I want to show you that I actually use Grid. Have you ever worked on a website where you just wanted to center a button either vertically or horizontally, and it's just like a huge struggle? You're using like, gosh, I haven't used it for a while, but there's like a vertical line, or of course you could like wrap, if you're like trying to center images, that's a pain sometimes, that you could wrap it in like a p tag and then do text align center on the p tag or something like that. You could do like a width on the image and then set the margin to auto. There's like a whole bunch of different things you could do to like center things, or vertically or horizontally. But I found actually, and this didn't really occur to me for a while, but it kind of came apparent to me recently, a few months ago, and I started using it all the time, and I absolutely love it. It's using the grid to center stuff. So what I did here is I have literally I don't need a columns, but I'm going to leave the word my grid on here just to be very explicit of what we're doing. And I'm going to save that first of all. And let's go back to the grid here and do this. Let's comment this stuff out for a second. And let's just do background color. Let's do blue violet this time. And let's do a width of let's say 800 px and a height of 800 px. Okay, so let's take a look at this thing. We should have just a big old red box here. That's like too big for my screen. Sorry. Let's do 600. Don't need that much space to show you what I'm doing. Okay, got this box here. The content is over here exactly where we expect it to be. However, what I can do now is bring in my display grid. Let's get rid of these other things because we're not going to use them. I just want to show you this to you like in its raw form. And if I do display grid, nothing happens. Doesn't change anything, okay? But what I can do is I can say justify content, and I can say center, okay? Now that is going to justify, that's going to be the horizontal, okay? So notice it went center, right? Super cool. I just centered that with no margin autos, no wrapping like text align center, none of that junk, right? Now that one's actually pretty easy. A lot of people don't have a problem with that, and if you text align center or something like that, not a big deal. But what if I want this thing to be vertically center in this div, which I think comes up a lot, and people have a really, like, I always had a hard time like figuring out the right way to do it, and like it seems like every time I did it, I would use a different method because I would forget what I did on the last website, and I didn't want to go dig it up, so I'd go Google it and I'd find a different way of doing it, and they all worked, right? You would come up with different ways, but this is the way I want you to learn and to remember. And if you forget, come back to this video and reiterate it in your brain, and then just stick it with your brain and keep it there. This is the best way to do this. So now what I'm going to say is I'm going to say align items, center, Isn't that cool? And that works with the display grid. So now, look at that. Center, center, right? There actually is a little bit of a margin on top of the P. So if we change this from a P to a span, which wouldn't have any styling with it, it would be a little bit more center. I believe that's why we're seeing that. Or maybe it is center and my eyes are deceiving me. Kind of doesn't look like it, but it is. So that's how you center stuff. While we're at it, if you wanted something to be at the end of a, if you wanted something that you didn't want it vertical or horizontal, what you could do is you could say if you want it, and you can use this instead of floats. Isn't that amazing? You don't have to float anything anymore. So justify, if you remember, justify content is for the horizontal axis. So if I say end, it'll actually go to the right, right? Now, align items is for the horizontal axis. So if I say end here, it's going to go to the bottom. So now I can put something in the bottom right with no floats, no weirdness, right? So I don't know about you, but that is super exciting stuff. It's all these little things that help speed up my workflow and make me really proficient. And this is kind of the kind of stuff that the reason I can make a website and amazing, really beautiful website in 20 to 40 hours, where it would take other people 2 to 3 weeks to dial this kind of stuff in, is because if you know grid, you can dial your front end very quickly, very, very quickly. I love going fast. I love getting things done because I'm always about the end result. Okay, so one other thing, and I actually have to go back for this. Dang it. It's one thing I wanted to cover when I had a grid. Okay. And I don't need the photo grid, anything like that to show it to you. So let's get rid of that for a second. Actually, you know what? It actually might be really nice to show you with the photo grid. Okay. Let's get this stuff here. Okay. See, IMG, lost my stuff here. Is going to be width, 100%. Sorry, I wanted to cover this with you a second ago. I completely forgot. Bear with me. Let's go backwards here a little bit. Okay, so now we have our photo grid back. We have our grids. Okay. And did I get the width messed up? IMG. It's the photo grids must be messed up, right? Oh yeah, I don't have my photo grid. Okay. If you remember right, I copied that, put that there. It's going to be the same thing. We just don't, we're just not caring about that, and we're getting rid of that. Okay. Okay, let's get back to where we were at. And I'm still messing something up. I didn't have to change. I have to change this photo grid. I'm going to show you something cool. Sorry, I have to go backwards, and hopefully that didn't take too much of your time. Okay, so I have that grid again, and you can see it here, and it's working. Let's say I wanted this to be the same size. I wanted this, and then all these columns I wanted the same, but I wanted this particular one to be bigger than all the rest. Well, you might be tempted to make several grids and be okay, well, it's on the last one, so if I do 3 over here, it'll be bigger, but well, it makes this one bigger too, but I didn't want that one to be bigger. I just wanted this one to be bigger. Well, you can do that by controlling the column ending. So if I wanted to, what I can do, let's do the, dang it, I don't know why I'm going forwards and backwards. Okay, so let's go back to that. So now we're back to where we were, and I wanted this one to be bigger, right? But not all of them, just that one column. I just want this one column to be bigger. What I can do is I can say, and this is, I probably should do it, I can show it onto a couple of them, but I'm going to say grid column end. So this is going to apply to the column that it's in, because it's a column of its own. So I'm going to say grid column end, and I'm going to say span 2. And now it's going to be bigger than the other ones, right? But I guess it dropped down to the next level because I have two, because there's not enough room up here. So it does illustrate my point, but if you want it to span 2 and you have already 2 columns in front of it, so chances are what you would want to do is you might want to you want it to span 2 and you want it to cover 3 total, you just want to get rid of one of these. That way it would flow better, right? Make more sense? So now this one is spanning 2. You only have 1 up here. All the other ones are equal. Anyway, I think that's really cool. It's helped me a lot. Helped me a lot. Like a lot of times, equal columns are great, especially when you're showing like blog posts or some other information that everything's really consistent. But I use this spanning thing quite a bit when I'm making like navigations. Like maybe like I want my logo to span like 3, but I want like all the rest of my grid to be like a whole bunch of columns of 1 or something. So that's just a quick example, but I think it's relevant. Okay, so now I used this for basically everything I've done like for a long time. This has got me by, but then there were certain circumstances where I was like, this isn't quite as flexible as I need it to be. And what I found out was there's a thing called grid area, which can actually be a little bit more helpful in some situations than this specifically. So what we'll do, let's just start over so it makes more sense, okay? So we'll do that. Let's get rid of this stuff. Okay, so first of all, let's make up a couple places here. Let's say this is a title area, and this is going to be a, let's do a few things here. So we'll say title, summary, we'll call this like info. I don't know. I'm just kind of making stuff up here because I think it helps. And then let's say this is our register. Maybe it's an event or something. So what I do to make this grid area thing work is I put a class on each one of these. And this is actually the content inside, which we'll make a little bit better. But I'm going to call the class the same thing I put on here. And that's kind of why I wanted to first come up with like what was in there, because I need to know what the class is going to be. So summary, and then info, something like that. Now this is a little bit more advanced, and it's supposed to be a tutorial for beginners. But if you're using grids, you probably have been around the block a few times. I'm going to assume that you would like to know everything that I use. So that's where I'm kind of going with this. So title, this is like, so this is such a great day. And then the summary is just going to be some lorem ipsum. Oops, lorem. And then info, you know, time's running out to book. Something like that, I don't know. And then register, let's say register is like a button, okay? We'll put a button in there, register. Okay, and if you saw this without any CSS, which we don't have any right now, right? We just have the body zeroed out. It's just gonna go straight down the page, right? And that's what you would expect. But let's use this grid area thing to you know, make it really cool. The first thing that we need to do is we need to associate these things with some colors so that we can see what they're doing. So we had title, summary, info, and register. Okay, so we're going to say title. And the title is going to have, we're going to call this grid area, okay? Area. Now you could call these anything you want. I'll show you where that ties in a second. We're going to call this grid area A, and we're going to give it a background color of, how about coral? Okay. Coral or coral. I don't know if that's how you say that. I'm not sure what that color is. Okay, so, and then I'm going to do a couple more of these. And we had, sorry, it's summary, info, and register. Okay, so let's do summary, info, and register. And let's give them all different colors. This one will be like over here. I'm gonna go into this there, just so we can really visualize what's happening. Okay. All right, cool. So now we should have some background colors, right? And then we're gonna do B, C, D. Now these should probably make no sense to you right now, and I hope so, because that would be weird if they did, unless you know grid. But if those make no sense, don't worry about that. A, B, C, D. Okay. Now we should have colors though, right? And it's just going straight down, no grid whatsoever. That's what we were expecting. This is what we wanted, the rainbow. Now what we can do is we can come up here, and I think it's called my grid still, right? Yep. So we're going to go into here, and I'm going to say my grid. need a dot first for the class. My grid, and my grid is going to basically be equal to display grid. Same thing we had on the last one. And then we're going to say grid template areas. Okay. Now this is where it gets tricky. We're going to have, we have 4 areas, but we're going to have 3 columns. And this is going to kind of help me illustrate how this works. So the easiest way to do this is open this up like this. Oops, not like that. Auto completed. And what we'll do is we'll say we want the first row to consist of, we want the title to be in the first row. So we don't want it to go very far. We want it to stay to the left. So I'm going to say A, and then I'm going to say B, and then C. So that's going to make 3 columns of these 3, right? A, B, C, right? And then the next row, I find it really easy to do it this way. You can handle it however you want, but, oops, didn't tab over the way I want. I want these like right underneath each other, right? So I can, like, this is my grid basically. And then on the next row, I'm going to say I want it to be A, B, C as well. And then on the next row, I'm going to say A, B, and then the last thing I want is D. So I want the register button to basically be down in a right-hand corner. This is going to make more sense in a second. And that actually is what we want. Now it's not going to look very good. We're going to improve it, but I want you to see what it looks like right now. So don't be surprised when it doesn't look that great. Okay, cool. But check this out. I've got A going all the way down, right? Because if you see here, I have A going down through here, right? A. That means it covers my whole thing. And then I've got B, which covers this whole row. And then on the last row, C is covering two rows, and then D is the last one. So you can see, and they kind of like are stuck together, but like you almost can't tell that this is 2. The way you can tell and make this better is we can put the template columns on there. So we're going to say grid, template, rows, and columns. Grid, template, rows. I'm not seeing it. Probably is there, but I'm not seeing it. Template, rows. Okay. Template, rows is going to be 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. They're going to be equal. And the columns, I want the same way. So I'm going to say grid template columns, I want to be equal. That'll help, like, if see this content, how it's stretched, it actually autoed. That's what happened. There's a lot of content there and it autoed out. Actually, before I put these in, let me show you something. So if I go here, this is something I forgot to cover with you earlier. I didn't forget, it's just something you kind of become aware of. But let's just say I have like a little bit of content in here, okay? That's my summary, it's really short. Well, now notice it like autos out, and now these are all actually 1FRs, right? But because my content is bigger, I still want it to be 1FR. I just want it to go down and not out like right and left and like shrink my other columns. So that's why I have the grid template columns here. Let's bring these back in. Let's get rid of rows for a second so we can talk about that. The grid template columns will make it so that it equals back out, right? And now you can actually see that this one is getting a little bit bigger because it can't crunch down on itself. Now what I want to do is I want to, for instance, I want in this title area, I want like a featured image. Let's say we want this thing again. So we'll get one of these and go back here, and in column A, which is the title column, I'm going to say IMG, plug that bad boy in, and I really don't know why it does all the extra text when it feels like I'm not copying that. Okay, I'm not worried about alt right now. Okay, cool. And actually, let's do a really big image that like is way too big for the space. So let's say this thing is 3,000. It's a monster. But we want our columns to control that, right? So now if you remember, you can probably answer this too. Why did this take up the whole space? Well, one, I put 3,000, but it didn't constrain to its container because I erased that image 100%, right? When you're not using Bootstrap or Foundation, you always have to have your image width 100% to constrain it. Now, is it smart to put a 3,000 pixel image in such a small place and let your grid constrain it? Probably not. You would want to use something that's closer to what this actually is, which is probably more like 600 pixels or 700 pixels. But I just wanted to illustrate to you that this is going to shrink down. But wow, what happened here? This is really cool. So my title's still up here, and we're still, A is still this column, and then I have all this room for this, but now you can see that this is taking up 2/3 of this. But wait, what? This is a problem. I wanted this to take up 2/3, but I wanted this to be at the bottom. So what I could do is I could actually say, well, that button is only about, what, 20 pixels high? So I could actually come in here and I could go down to my rows right here, comment it in. Now notice nothing's going to change really when I comment it in at first. It's just equal, right? Kind of changed a little bit there. But what I can do is on the last one, instead of doing an equal, I could say 20 px. So my last row is now 20 pixels big, and that drops my register all the way to the bottom where I was hoping to have it, right? So now we're kind of getting what we want, and that's grid template areas. But check this out too. What if I wanted this to make this a little bit more complex? What if I wanted the register area? Maybe I have a sentence in front of it, but I want it to cover all through here. I can come up to this grid area. Think of this as like a tic-tac-toe board. It's the same thing you're seeing over here. And I want D to be over here. So now D, which is this register area, is going to be taking up part of this too. So check it out. This is cool stuff. Maybe I have a sentence in front of it and then the register button. I don't know. But I think this does a really good job of illustrating how to use the grid areas. Again, leave your comments down below. Tell me what you think about grid CSS. There might be some follow-up to this one in the future. Honestly, I've been using it for a while. I just taught you everything that I know and use with it, but I'm sure there's like some more good things that I haven't even like had a chance to experiment with. I'm a full stack developer, so I spend a lot of time on the back and the front. Unfortunately, I don't get to spend as much time on the front as I want, so this is kind of like, this has got me, this does everything that Bootstrap does plus a lot more, or Foundation or whatever, so this totally satisfied all those needs. Feel free to comment down below if you know something about grid that like you're like, hey Eric, you should definitely check this out. It's something that probably should have been included, or maybe a follow-up should be done on this. I'd love to hear about it. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you around. Come back and watch some of my videos, and let me know what you're thinking about all this stuff. Thanks. Bye.